Howdy, howdy. This is Pika representing the Poseidons for the first and only Poseidon podcast. And today we are going to be talking about Germany. Germany has had a very, very long history. There were, to start it off at the very beginning, Germany was first claimed by a whole bunch of different tribes of people. They all lived in the general area and tended to live in general peace. and the th- and eventually they were discovered by the Romans after a little while, and they decided to just not invade it because they didn't want the land. After some stuff that happens, like the invasion of the Huns and the fall of Rome, they tended to move more to its more general area and start becoming more individual groups. Instead of the teeny tiny little tribes there were before, now they started to become actual things, places that you can call countries. And really, there are more families, but multiple families that were popular at the time were Saxony, Bavaria, which we do know nowadays. Around this time, there was the rise of a place called the Holy Roman Empire, is most people and historians consider to be the actual father of what Germany is now. There, it was basic. It wasn't very good at keeping itself together. It was really more a kingdom. It was that had a king that ruled over kingdoms that had kings. It didn't work well because there's so many different groups of people here. But overall, it helped start a German reunification that came up many years later. Obviously, the Holy Roman Empire was based off of Christianity, which had been started a while back, but overall, it led to general peace, besides besides some fighting, until year 1517, which Martin Luther decided to say that the church was not good in the way it was doing, which led to a huge war on which side was good, which led to the original fall of the Holy Roman Empire. And around this time, the Holy Roman Empire had become more split up in between a few different groups. Some people that started off as German eventually went off to lead to France. There were then two mainly German groups came out on top out of almost everybody. Russia, no, Prussia. Sorry about that. Prussia and the Habsburgs, which later on became known as Austria. They they were very against each other, and eventually they had to settle their differences to fight each other during the Napoleonic Wars. And if you don't know, these were wars where a man named Napoleon basically decided to try to take over the entirety of Europe, and he almost managed it. But yeah, if they eventually pushed him back, and Germany was brought back to its general messed upness. Eventually, it eventually Germany started coming together as in a huge unification unit uh, movement that started many years ago. That eventually made it so that around around 1815 there were it became Germany became a general group and a country instead of teeny tiny little German states, with some exceptions like Luxembourg and all that, but that's its own thing. And after the unification of Germany, they had become one of the most big powers in the entirety of Europe, and they had become allied with Austria-Hungary. And this started to lead to other groups allying with each other because they didn't like the fact that these two super powerful groups were allied together and basically basically had the ability to stand up by themselves and destroy everybody else. So they started allying together, and as more people became allies of each other, eventually one thing would tick off the start of the First World War, after a random guy, a random ruler of a country was shot, it led to one of its allies getting in the war, and another one, and eventually Germany found itself in the middle of a war. And instead of de-escalation, Germany went on the offensive and decided that just because they're brought into a war, they weren't going to try to de-escalate or bring down the amount of death that was going on. They continued the war as long as they possibly could, and creating a war of attrition where they eventually lost. And a majority of the world decided that because of how active and aggressive Germany has been, they had to pay a majority of the they had to pay a majority of the winners money, and they had to have general things that made it so that they could not be as powerful as they just were. Of course, we now know that would happen again, but as we go on, because of all of this general mess and the fact that Germany was weakened, their economy was bust. It was some of the worst they had seen for the longest time. So eventually, a cool a person that at the time they thought was cool and that actually could help with the economic recovery. And this man, you probably know him, was Adolf Hitler. Let's Now we get into World War II. Of course, we're not. Of course, we were not. We were told to not cover this as much, which makes sense. It's a short amount of time, but as a general wrapping things up into a small amount of area, World War II started off when Germany wanted revenge, basically, for being forced to not to put down a whole bunch of their groups. They wanted to become bigger and have living space and make the German people true. And as we know nowadays, they did some pretty bad things for doing this. On a little bit faster, they started declaring war on a lot of people. And the thing is, instead of them actually trying to help those people, they just basically told them to stop, but they never stopped. That's the thing. And because of this, the main one of the main problems with it was that Germany was putting down peoples of Jewish faith, and also people who were handicapped and not German. They were they were killing thousands, and obviously what we know as in concentration camps, and it is a national tragedy even to this day. Uh, and eventually, the Allies had gained help from not to mention that the Allies had gained help from the United States, which at the time was the biggest country, the strongest country in the world, and they had managed to gain help from the United States when Germany's ally, Japan, had decided to be rude. And then they came in the war. The war was pretty swiftly ended after that, and in general, Germany had to pay fines. Everybody realized how bad it was in Germany, and this led to another not so good time in German history. This was where, well, firstly, Germany lost a lot of land, but it was split into two different groups. The first one happened to be it was East and West Germany. And the thing about these two was that they are both ruled by governed mostly by different groups. To the left, it was United States and UK. You know, mostly people typically think of them as democratic and good. And to the right, it was by the USSR. And the USSR had seen what had happened, and they created the Iron Curtain, basically stopping German reunification at all, and forcing Germany to be split into two for many years. And this was the start of the Cold War. To not go through all of the politics that went through the Cold War, the United States and the USSR were at war with each other, but no real fighting really happened that wasn't in other countries. But one huge problem with Germany was the fact that Berlin was split in between both the Allies and the USSR. And the USSR didn't like this because right in the middle, past their Iron Curtain, there was a group of allies who were trying to spread democracy and free thinking. And the thing is, that is what they were trying to stop at the time, really. And so they built the Berlin Wall, which effectively stopped East Germans from going to West Germans, and even further made it so that Germans could not go with each other. Of course, there were other things that were tried in Berlin, as in they tried to make sure that the people in East Berlin couldn't get food. They just flew in food. It didn't work. But after a while, after a while of the Cold War, East and West Berlin were not doing very good. They were still not kept apart for many years, for multiple years. And then the USSR had fallen, which has left which had left many of the groups that it had control over before, like like East Germany. It they had this they were now on their own to defend who they were, and East Germ and East Germany was still the government was still communist, and basically the Berlin Wall fell. It was knocked over by the people after East Berlin had said that the wall would no longer be standing. And now this and after East and West Berlin be, had been able to come together, Germany as a whole had started to become more reunified. The wall had fallen, and also did the other wall, the seal wall, the one that covered literally stuck them apart from the West Germany. And after they were able to become independent again, there was a gigantic German movement to be reunified and become one great Germany, who would be independent and would not do any atrocities that they are known for doing in the past, and would eventually lead to the Germany we have nowadays, being one of the most populous countries in the world, and if you actually look at populations. But and Germany as a whole nowadays is considered to be a generally great country that has many years of them having to face hardships and general crazy men that tried to control Germany and force other general German peoples out and into their general rule. But like I was saying, that's Germany for now. As far as we know, something hopefully shouldn't happen with Germany yet. But until that happens, that's Germany in general since about the zeros to the 2000s. Have a good day.